So with that, I will confirm. Are we, it looks like we're now live. Is that correct, Jared?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, I'd like to call the June 1st City of Laverne Measure LV Oversight Committee meeting to. I will go ahead and do a roll call. I will start with Chair Anabi.
Present.
Vice Chair Carney.
Oh, present. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Board members or committee members, Chang.
Here.
Simison.
Here.
And Ingalls.
Present.
Thank you. Okay, and I know we have to take roll call on every item and take a voice vote. So we'll go through it in that order.
So you know, I don't know if it's me, but your voice is breaking off sometimes and we can't hear you. Is that just me or everybody?
No, me too.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
all of us.
I was like listening.
Then let me do this. It might be because I'm doing this from home. I apologize. I'm going to turn off my screen. Sometimes that helps on the video. We'll see if that works.
It seems to be a problem with your mic, not your buffering.
Okay, is that better or not?
That's better.
Okay, we'll go this way. And I'll try and do the least amount of talking as possible. As we call the meeting order, I'd like to just spend a couple minutes. As the committee is aware, we had two members who stepped down. There was Ron White and Dave Sisto. Both have moved out of the community, so they could not continue their term. Council went back out and requested consideration of additional individuals of interest. And we were fortunate enough to add Ron Ingalls and Jennifer Simison. And I thought I would just have them take a moment and share a little bit about themselves and introduce themselves. So, Ed, Jennifer.
Okay, I'm Jennifer Simison. I've been in town since '79 and super active in the community, especially in the early days, PTA and presidents and council presidents, and doing a lot of community involvement there, making our schools, working on our schools. And I've been on committees for the parks, and I've been on committees when we were doing our reviews, general plan for the committees. Been away for a while, and I was very excited to get back on this. I am a CFO. My husband and I've had a construction company for 45 years. Budgets, analysis, cost accounting, and things are right in my bailiwick. So I'm super excited to be opportunity to do this. And Chief Ingalls and I worked together for many years on the DARE program. So I still call you Chief, but Ron. And so I'm excited to be here and see if I can contribute and help the committee and the community feel very proud that they voted for the tax.
Thank you. Ron?
Yes. First of all, it's very nice to meet all of you. I wish it was under a little different circumstances and we were in the same room. That makes things a lot easier. I grew up in Laverne. I graduated from local schools, Bonita High School, later attended University of Laverne. In 1971, I joined the Laverne Police Department, came up through the ranks, eventually was police chief, and I served as the police chief for 13 years, which in chief's years is quite a long time. That usually doesn't happen. So I was very fortunate to work for this great city and had great support from the community and from the city councils I worked for. After that, I retired in 2006. I then did an interim chief's job at Irwindale Police Department, which was quite different than Laverne and quite a bit of a challenge. There was lots of problems there that I was able to work through. Then after that, Steve Cooley, the district attorney at the time of Los Angeles County, appointed me to a position of law enforcement liaison to all of the police chiefs in Los Angeles County, which, if you don't know, there's about 45 of them. So I was the point of contact if they had any issues with the district attorney's office, where they're filing a case, an officer involved shooting, whatever the case may be. I was the person they called to navigate the bureaucracy of the largest DA's office in the country, 1,000 lawyers. and 300 investigators. So it's obviously a very large organization. Retired from that in 2016. So I did over 10 years with the DA's office. And then soon after that, I was lucky enough to be appointed to take my good friend Robert Rodriguez's spot on the city council after he passed away. And I served on the city council for a little over a year and a half, which was kind of an eye opener for me, believe it or not. Even though I'd been around the city so long, I'd never been on that side of the table. So it was quite a different experience, but also enjoyed that. Laverne's is still my home. It's going to be my home until the day I die. I love the city. Again, my whole adult life pretty much has been spent working in the city and obviously living in the city. So it's a pleasure to serve on this, and hopefully I can help all of us succeed. But I'm looking forward to meeting all of you in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Any of the others like to introduce yourself to the rest of the committee or move into the agenda? There you go.
I'm Marlene Carney, and I've been in Laverne since 2003. And I semi-retired in 2019 after a 35-year career in chambers of commerce. I worked for the Irwindale Chamber for 5 years, the California Chamber for quite a few years. I can't even remember now, 20 years. And so now I'm doing a lot of volunteering. I volunteer with Shepherd's Pantry, with the Huntington Library, with the Laverne Chamber. I'm an ambassador, and my husband and I have adult children and grandchildren, but it's just the two of us in Laverne doing as much as we can to stay active, and particularly during this time. So it's nice to meet everyone.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Kenny, would you like to say a couple words?
Hi, I'm Kenny Chang. Been a banker for over 20 years, and now I own my small business out of Glendale and Palmdale. And glad to be here, and being in finance for over 20 years, so hopefully we'll bring the experience and the background to the committee, and hopefully we'll budget it accordingly, and make the rest of the resident proud. Nice meeting you guys.
Annie?
Sure. So my name is Danny Anavi. Been in Laverne since around '84. Currently work at the LA DA's office. I'm an investigative auditor there. Prior to that, I worked about 14 years with the California Franchise Tax Board, where I did tax audits. I also own and operate a CPA firm out of Upland, where we do tax work and accounting and bookkeeping services for small businesses. And look forward to meeting everybody.
Yes, we can get together.
Yeah.
Hopefully the next meeting we have will be in person. So I have to imagine it will. So we will have that opportunity. So thank you all for serving on this board. Us put these dollars or show these dollars how they're being used, and also comporting to what the electorate as well as what the council's desires are. In a minute, I think go ahead and see if there's any public comment. There hadn't been any requested earlier, but I'll see if anything else has come in. JR?
No, sir, nothing else has been received.
In and out. Bob, it might be your microphone. You're still kind of going in and out a little bit. So you might want to, I don't know if you can get closer to the mic.
I will try. Is that better?
That's better, yeah.
Okay. JR, no public comment?
None received, sir.
Okay. What I'm going to do is, because I know we are waiting on Mark Alvarado, and Mark is actually, he's taken advantage of a break with his kids, so he will be coming on remotely. And I think he's still running a little late. Is that right, Christy?
Yeah, he said about 5 minutes, which it's been longer than that, so.
Okay. So what I'd like to do is, I'll just reverse the order here a little bit. And that is, as when we had our meeting last year, our first meeting and our only meeting of the year, it was because we didn't have, it wasn't necessary to have the additional 2 meetings because we didn't have books that we were and costs that we were confirming and closing. But as you can see under action item 4C, we're making the calendar of our meetings that we are going to target. And we thought for planning purposes, because we don't meet at least on a regular basis, we can certainly call more meetings if we should, if we need to. But I'd like to get these meetings set for the benefit of the committee and just so you can understand our targets. So the August 5th date, we close our books the first part of August. And so we will have all our expenses at that point to where we can report a full year of expenditures based on what we anticipated for Measure LV dollars, as well as the revenue. So at that point, we will know through the June 31st date or June 30th date, what those are, and then we can capture all those expenses. So that's what that date will be, is to report that to the committee. Followed by that in February, that will be after the CAFR, our consolidated audit, or comprehensive audit has been completed. And so we will be bringing that to the committee so that you can see what the actual confirmed dollars by the audit, and we'll be asking for concurrence with that. And so that meeting will be established for then. And then June 7th will be when we have our next adoption of the next year's budget and kind of approval or consideration of our recommendation for how much of the next year's dollars we expect and based on our increases and health insurance increases. Does that make sense? And do those dates at this point work for the committee?
So far, who knows?
So we will, of course, we'll send out reminders and the agenda as we get closer. What I will do is I'll have an email sent out this next week with calendar invites for these dates so that you can at least put them on your calendar, and then we can go. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, we'll move back up. And the first 2, which are the most important items, is the first one is to review expenditures and revenues for the current year. And that is the year that we're in now that we're expending. Because I think it's important to show, here's what we communicated last year at this time, what we expected to spend as a result of the salary increases. And then this is to show what we're estimating we will spend by the end of the year, as well as the revenue. We'll recall, and we've given the committee a couple of reports email-wise throughout the year that our revenues have done significantly better, I'd say, than what we had expected, considering we were going into a pandemic when we did our projections last year. Originally, I think we had estimated 2.7, and we were really conservative on that. And now we are anticipating an excess of 3.3, but I think it's even a little more than that. But I will let Christy go through those numbers with you. Take any questions.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, and this is what we had sent you a couple weeks ago. But as you can see, the bottom is the original forecast, and the top is the updated forecast. So the top line is the tax measures expected. So you can see in year 1, we had, which is 2021, so this current fiscal year, we have 3.3 is what we anticipate for the end of the year. And our original forecast was 2.7. And that was once we got through the pandemic, or during the pandemic, when we put out our estimated revenues, we had reduced those because we really didn't know what to expect. So you can see in year 2 for 21-22, we anticipate 3.4 for that year. So from year 1 to year 2, that's a 5% increase. And then going after that, we are estimating, we're being a little more conservative, and we're estimating 2% for our revenue. And then you can see that second line is the projected total personnel cost increases. And for year 2021, that 862,000, that represents 7 months of increases, because we put those into place into December. So that's that 860. And then for 21-22, we're anticipating a 1.8 million for next year.
And I'd like to stop there for a second, and that the amount, the 860 for 7 months, it is a significantly larger amount than what we expect on an annual basis for increases. And the reason it was so significant is because we had gotten so far behind the market and we had to catch up. It was roughly 2 years worth of increases that had to be implemented to catch up to the market at that time.
Right.
So they were much higher than what would be in a normal year.
Right. So we were still catching up. So that's why you see moving forward from year 2 to year 3, the increase is $600,000. And that's obviously an anticipated cost.
So what I'd like to do, and we went through a lot of numbers right there, I'd like to just focus on year 1 for the moment and our projection that we had from last year to where we see ourselves. Stop and see any questions, and then we can start at the out year.
Sorry, you broke up, Bob.
Sorry, everybody. So what I was asking is, I'd like to focus on year 1 and just see if there are any questions relative to our original forecast versus what we are assuming as estimated actual.
Okay.
I have one quick question. The increase, is that related to the sales tax that comes in from car sales that you weren't expecting? Is that what caused the difference, or is it just the COVID didn't affect things as much as you thought?
It's a little bit of both, I would say. Not specifically. I mean, we are getting some car sales tax, but with not knowing what to expect with the pandemic, we were conservative, and those numbers just came in better than when we anticipated. Part of it too is the online sales. We had a larger increase, or an increase that we didn't anticipate from the county pools for the online sales tax, or online sales and the tax from those purchases.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question on the online sales. We were discussing about Amazon and Amazon changing their who gets the sales tax money. I know it's something in there talking about, but are we talking about cities getting together to fight Amazon having all their sales tax go to the distribution center city rather than the communities that buy it, and therefore we will lose a lot of tax dollars?
So
Oh, I don't, go ahead, Chris, you might have more information on that.
Well, so we just recently got some information about our sales tax from HDL, who is our consultant. And we anticipated the change with Amazon having a larger impact than they estimate it will have. Obviously, we don't know. These are just estimates from HDL. But they're anticipating that it's going to be a 73% that will continue to keep. So as of this point, they're looking at it impacting us about 27%. And really, Amazon is still in the works. I think that if that was something, and Bob may know better on this, but the league is really good about looking into, League of California Cities is looking really good at looking at these issues if they do impact the cities. And I would anticipate that that might be something that we look at if we do see a major drop in those taxes, but Bob might have some more insight on that.
Yeah, that was going to be, oh, sorry.
No, sorry. This is Mark. I apologize for being a few minutes late, but if I can just chime in, we'll get a little bit more information in a few months as we kind of get close, we get more of the end of the year numbers. But we're definitely anticipating coming back to the group with better, little bit better numbers than what we have now. Hearing based on what Christy said, that the impact from Amazon, if it does happen, it's going to be a little bit less than what we had originally anticipated. And regarding cities getting together, cities always do, but whether we can change anything is something to be determined later, and we can't assume that until that happens. But hopefully we'll have a little bit better numbers when we come to the council in a few months with kind of a little bit more clarity as to the end of the current fiscal year numbers.
Do we have any big box opportunities in our communities that we can start, middle big box or something? Or is there something that, because we are such a suburb, which is why we live here, which is why we love it. But if our tax base from online sales goes to another distribution center, that could affect our bedroom community so much. And I didn't know if there was and there's some more development that's going to bring in more retail.
Not large boxes, as much as more ancillary use, I'll call it, to the gold line and that area. That's probably our greatest opportunity to leverage our space available with what would be an attractable retail sales. Osh closed a couple years ago. We've obviously been working with the landlord to replace that. Before COVID, they had initiated a letter of interest with a gym. So that doesn't generate sales tax. So but that is where the market for them was, as opposed to more large retail at this point. Really hard to find any more large retail. But if there are opportunities that present itself and Osh comes to us with a proposal, we'll obviously jump at that as well.
Okay. Just, if you hear more things from your consultant about Amazon, I'd be more than happy to help make sure we fight something of that nature for all small towns around the community, around LA.
Yeah, where the numbers were significantly less than what we feared when we got the last report, so that's good. And then hopefully, if there is something, and then if it ends up being something like that, it'll be usually a class action. It gets filed on behalf of all the cities that we all just join in and share in the costs if there's an opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Yes, I'm glad Marcus had joined us. Just some clarification on the numbers here. I see that the originally forecast about 761 on the cost increase, and then the updated has higher numbers, and then moving to every year is about 20% increase. How does that relate to the actual? I know Christy mentioned that we are catching up. That increasing relate to the catch up, or how do we come up with that 20% increase year after year, and the difference with the original forecast?
So the revised number for the current year, the 862, is obviously based on the actual activity. Actual activity meaning the actual numbers that were finalized in terms of what the cost of living increases were. But the reason why it's a little bit lower than what a normal year would be is because it's prorated for the amount of months for the current fiscal year. So 862 is a good number for what it was for the amount for the current fiscal year. And the larger increase when you look at 21-22, going from 862 to 1.8, is two pieces. One, it's the catch up of the final amount of what the base year would be, plus then looking at what a current year would be. If you look at the salaries citywide, salaries are about 16 million, and then benefits that are related to this are going to be anywhere from 10 to 11 million. So you put that together and then you multiply that by anywhere from 2 to 3%, and now you're starting to look at anywhere from $500,000-$700,000. So that's kind of what we have to start. That's kind of how we gauge what the increases are going to be based on. Not every year is going to be a cost increase of 3%. 3% is usually kind of a gauge that you would use when you have to look at surveys of other cities. That's kind of like that benchmark, because 3% is kind of that CPI number that people look at as to kind of like, okay, well, that's a normal year. Not necessarily, it's not always, but it could be more, it could be less. So that's kind of how we're gauging how these increases are going.
Okay.
But definitely we can tweak it as we get to closer to the negotiations, not necessarily the negotiations, but in terms of the analysis that's done within the city in terms of the amount that the city is looking at in terms of giving the cost increases to keep up with the median salary increases and the cost of the benefits and such.
Okay, got it. So this is basically a piece of the total, cost, basically, and in excess of what LV measure is covering. Correct?
So this cost is going to be directly related to whatever the amount of the cost of living increase that is going to be attributable, that's going to be paid to the employees, plus the related benefits, personnel cost benefits, certain benefits of the health insurance, PERS costs that are directly related to the salary increase.
Right.
And again, these are going to be directly related to whatever increases that the city is looking at giving employees to keep employees at the market average with surrounding cities per the instructions of Measure LV.
Right. I understand that. I'm just saying that, let's say the 1.8, let's say for year 2, that's the excess of the total budget.
Your general budget.
Right, of your general budget, because
Your general fund is that is 1,800,000 more than you have in the general fund. Is that why it's coming over to Measure?
Well, there's 2 tiers that are Measure LV, right? And this is all just about that first tier, which is any of the increased, the median market adjustment cost from the base year. So starting in 2021, whatever changes are relative to median adjustments as well as increases in health insurance, this money, this charge reflects that. So it's not necessarily what's in the general fund. Measure has been, at least in tier 1, is responsible for paying. Does that make sense? So what we did is we look at, and I'll just use this as an example, if beginning of last year, our personnel budget was $20 million. And the median increases and then the health insurance increases, the difference between those numbers and is what we charged to Measure LV. And we're looking at that every year going forward. So it's just that relative increase that gets added on year after year. So it is compounding because we have what the expense we had in the current year plus what we're adding in the new year. That gets added into that Measure LV is responsible for. Does that make sense?
Does the general fund every year though also increase its budget for the employees' expenses and the personal, or is it all being burdened to our tier one?
So there are anything that is not a median adjustment or a health insurance increase. So if we have other increases, like we get median or merit adjustments on an annual basis.
So all
The general fund, that doesn't fall here. That goes to the general fund and that gets absorbed into the rest of the operating.
Can we get kind of like a breakdown of that maybe from Mark in the future to see that, you know, you have this much, how do we get to, you decided the amount of money, the extra $862,000. How much did the general fund absorb and how much are we absorbing? Or is this what this tier one is for, is the absorption except for your merit?
This is what this number reflects what the tier one was approved for.
Okay, so it's 100% of the increases of the personnel goes to our measure.
I would say the median market adjustments.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Like we added a sergeant's position that's proposed in the budget. So that's not in here. That's in the general fund. That's not part of this because the general fund took that on. So when you say increases, I want to be very specific. It is only the relative market adjustments, the difference for that year, plus any increases in health insurance premiums. Those are the only two components that are reflected in tier one.
Okay, we're not taking the full burden.
No.
No.
Thank you.
Other questions?
In this report, do we have anything about tier two funds in here with your analysis? You said this is all about tier one. How about tier two, which has all the additional, you figured another $500,600,000 that might be available?
So what I'd like to do is, and yes, I want to talk about year one and get those questions, and then we can kind of talk about the projections and how that then dovetails into the tier two.
Okay, great, thanks.
Any other questions about year one and our projection versus our updated forecast? Okay. So then looking at just year two for the moment, which is the 21-22, which is the current budget we are in now. As mentioned, this reflects the estimated use of about 1.8 million. Roughly 350,000 of that is for new median adjustments for this upcoming year, plus what the full year of year one would look like. The budget is put together with that assumption in mind. One of the confirmations that needs to come to this group that I need to report on Monday is if that meets with the committee's concurrence. So that is one of the important pieces of having this meeting prior to the budget meeting. So want to at least discuss that, or at least see if there are any comments regarding that before I ask for a motion.
So year two, we're having medium adjustments, which are not, merit adjustments.
No, only median adjustments will
median,
be
not merit.
Yeah.
Sorry, same one. Healthcare.
Yep.
Insurance. I don't know what we can comment on that.
Well, if there are any questions about that, I will take a motion in a second to that there's a recommendation to use that money in tier one, which are for the specific purposes under tier one at this point.
So I guess what we're asking is for the group's concurrence that our estimate right now for the 21-22 fiscal year is the amount of Measure L that we're going to be needing is 1.8 million, and that's basically about 1.1, 1.2 that would basically rolls over from the prior year. Again, it's not 862 because we need a full year's worth. So that's kind of what our estimate. And then we're looking at about between 600,000 and 700,000 for the potential adjustments or cost of living increases, plus the related personnel cost increases that would be given to the employees for the 21-22 fiscal year. Our estimate right now is between 600,000 and 700,000. That's how we're coming up with our estimate right now of 1.8 million. And that's basically what we're asking right now is for your concurrence with that estimate. So that's what we're looking forward toward using out of the Measure LV monies for fiscal year 21-22.
Yes, Mark. So I think Christy had mentioned the 862. That's for 7 months, right? Of the actual cost. So if I multiply that and make a full 12 months, it's 1.4. So you're estimating the actual cost of this year is going to be higher 20% by 2022.
So that's great math, and I would do the same thing, except that 862 is a little. There's two pieces of it because part of that was for a full year for the fire department. They basically had two components. Part of theirs was for the full 12 months, and then part of theirs was for the 7 months. So you can't just take the 862 and annualize that over 12 months and get to that number and think that's the number. That's the normal thing that you would do, but part of that is part of that number's got a 12-month component already built into it.
Right.
So
for that one group. For that one group.
that's why our annualized number is not 1.4. It's closer between 1.1, 1.2.
Okay, so it's actually even better than 1.8.
No. The 1.8 already has what I just mentioned already calculated into it.
Right. So like I said, the actual of this year will be, if it were annualized, it will be 1.1. And then, in year 2, even at 1.1. So you foresee that increase in next year.
Yes. Yeah. And part of it was a little screwy because when you look at year one is a catch-up year.
Sure.
So the 1.1 by itself is a large number, a larger than normal number.
Sure.
So we're starting with that. We've got two components of 7 months, 12 months. So it's not a really good number to kind of use as a kind of build the basis.
Sure.
So that's why between year 1, year 2, it's kind of a little bit of a goofy calculation.
Right. No, I understand. I just
to get to a normal growth pattern.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for clarifying. Big thing. Just like Jennifer, I mentioned, maybe next time we can have a better breakdown. I think it's easier for people to understand than just a lump sum number. So it's kind of confusing. Like, okay, so what would that lump sum number equals to? So
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just a reference. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You would
Kenny.
and when we can do that when we pull together the actuals in October as well as what will come forward. So we'll have a better picture then and we'll have the whole year to be able to report.
So I have a question. So if this is you're looking for an approval for us to allocate the 1.8 million from our budget for our next year, is this the typical expenses? So every year from now on, we're setting the precedent this year. So it would be every year from now on that the increases are for the exact same expenses.
Yeah, for tier 1, it's the exact same expenses. No matter, these projections are only that you see and the updated forecast are only about the expenses that are included in tier one. They will not change as far as categories. And that's why we're projecting this out as such. It may be higher or lower depending on what the actual is. but
Right.
That's what we're doing here.
So that's kind of scary as we get just in 10 years. How the increase is, say in 10 years, it's $7 million more than just this year than last year. That's 7 million more. And how much is the general fund going up that same amount of money? Or does the general fund get that much more money to cover all your $20 million worth of payroll?
Well,
Increase.
it has different funding components, different revenues. So there's property tax, there is sales tax, there's UUP. So some of those go up by varying amounts. So, I mean, we're projecting, this year there's projected to be a deficit of like 600,000, give or take, in the general fund. And about 400,000 of that, 500,000 is one-time expenditures. So
Is there there's an assumption here then that the economy is not going to change? And I guess that's my question, is this keeps going up, and this is the assumption that there's not going to be another recession. Hopefully there's never going to be another pandemic, but that the economy is going to roll upward. And that's what these numbers are somewhat based on. I'm just thinking, because you had to go through a period in the last recession that, yes, there were no raises, there were no increases. So you're assuming that everything's going to be moving upward over the next 10 years.
conservatively, yes, but conservatively. So 2%.
And the only other issue I had with the sales tax is, as we were talking about Amazon, a lot of us did do a lot of online. And even if we shopped at a local store, you shop at Kohl's online, because it was convenient. That sales tax stayed, we got a portion of that. But as this COVID situation ends and we enter a new, the next normal, a lot of people are going to go out of the area to shop. And that money's going to stay. In other words, if they're not doing it online and they go to Home Depot and Glendora or Costco, that sales tax then no longer, that's going to stay in that city.
Mm-hmm.
So I just didn't know if you've accommodated that in your in the revenue projections for sales tax. I mean, I'm always hopeful that things are going to get better and that we're going to have more, as Jennifer mentioned, more types of businesses that can generate a significant amount of sales tax revenue to the city. But again,
So I will.
Go ahead, Bob.
And then I was going to defer to you because I know you met with HDL. But what we have it was referred to HDL, which is our sales tax consultant. So they are responsible for evaluating kind of a future forecasting in addition to monitoring our current activity. So we base these projections because, Marlene, we're coming into a period of really unknown. We can't use the past to predict our future because it's changed so much, right?
right.
So even these models are built with that little bit of a caveat, I guess. But and that's why we tried to take a bit of a conservative look. But Mark, I don't know if you have anything.
Well, and also this second slide has the revenue. Mark, that might help. The second.
No. What I was going to say was we have 5% built in for the next year because that's a little bit more clarity of what we receive, that the economy is going to continue to be strong as people get out and start to shop more. But after that, going out, we've only built in a 2% increase, which I'm very comfortable with as being very conservative. Yes, everything you said, Marlene, about what could happen, absolutely could. And that's why 2% is a very conservative, slow sales tax growth amount. Obviously, could a recession hit and we could be flat or even -1, -2, absolutely. But then you offset that a couple years later with everything coming back, and then you're at 5-6%. So when you look at 2% going out for the next 7-8 years, I'm very, very comfortable that that's a conservative number. That's a good number. And more than likely, I think we can come back later on when we get a little bit more clarity as what people are doing, that we could possibly even increase that up. But that takes into account all the different things that are going to start happening with people getting out and going physically to a brick and mortar store and all these different things.
Mark, a quick question. Now, this probably will change every year, correct? I mean, as you reevaluate things and see how things are going?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we'll be updating this at least 2 or 3 times during the year as we get more information. Every quarter we get sales tax data, and we get better forecasts. So we'll definitely be updating that multiple times throughout the year, each year.
Do you send that to us in an email like the paperwork you sent us this time?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we don't have to wait until October.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. So back to year 2. I looking for what the 1.8 and support for incorporating that for tier 1 within the upcoming budget.
I think that falls within the guidelines of what we've all discussed, and I would make that motion.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Who seconded it? I'm sorry.
Jennifer.
Okay.
Jennifer.
Okay. Thank you. Roll call. Daniel?
Yes, I approve as well.
Thank you. Marlene?
She muted.
Did she go up? Marlene?
Yes, I approve. Sorry about that.
Thank you. All right, Kenny? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Was that approved?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer
Yes.
and Ron?
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I did want to spend a couple minutes. We talked a little bit about the projections, obviously, but Marlene's question, I appreciate that because that was one of the things that I wanted to point out as it relates to the tier 2 dollars. And, if I can just go back and look at the original forecast that's up here, we were showing we were going to be negative in year 9. Obviously, the projections were better. So we have now year 9 sufficient money to describe it as such. However, then this is where kind of using a conservative revenue projection has a consequence, right? I mean, we could make these revenue projections whatever we wanted them to be and say, hey, look, we've got a lot of money that we can use in tier 2. And we just want to be cautious about not being overly optimistic at this point and overspending this money. Now, the fortunate thing is there's no need for tier 2 dollars, at least as far as any requests coming from departments that they have needs that can't be met with the general fund revenues that are coming in. I mentioned that sergeant position that was requested by the police department that got incorporated into the budget. So I was other general fund plans. If there was an experience where there wasn't enough general fund revenue outside of Measure LB to support whatever the request was, I may look to this and ask the committee to consider that under tier 2, whatever that might be. But what I'm trying to do, at least for the next couple of years, is to give us more opportunity to have sales tax experience to see what it looks like and how we generate revenue. before I lean on anything beyond tier one or even ask you to consider anything beyond tier one. So that's why, to your, I don't, there's nothing showing when we look at the 10-year projection. I also, there might be too small of an increase, or Kenny, to your point, the 20% growth of our expenses from year to year may be too rich in years 3 or 4. So we want some time to because that'll affect the end numbers, right? If our expenses are lower and our revenues are higher, we're going to enjoy a longer fund balance that we can then look at how we make use. But at this point, there's nothing that is being requested to be expended from that, and that's intentional on a couple of reasons that I just mentioned. So that's kind of the way I look. I'm looking at how at tier $2, and to be judicious about it, rather than just making too rich of assumptions at this point. Does that make sense? And I can answer any questions, but that's kind of where it's.
I have a question. When as a community member, when I read about tier 2 and voting for the measure, I thought that might be an avenue where it enhances something the community wants more than this being just salaries and wages. But we know salaries and wages create amazing people that keep our city running, and our fire department and our police department. But I always thought that there was something in the sales tax, and I don't know what it is today, but that could give the community the reason why, yes, we voted for this tax, and look at, we're getting this little perk, or we're getting this thing. And I don't know, because when I read it was, it could be support operations, or it can be improvements that in the parks, or it can be for emergency response capabilities, like, another canine dog or something. I mean, I kind of thought it was something that would give us more than, everyone's going to say, oh, it's just for, wages and salaries and stuff. And I thought, well, it's more. So I don't know if that even opens, or maybe the general fund has the money for more. I don't know. Since the general fund wages, the expenses are being taken care of by our new, our measure, that maybe some of those extra things that we've been wanting to do for the community, that they can feel, well, because you have this tax, we can do this. What do you think?
Well, so I understand where
you do.
This,
That's good.
What's that?
I said, I'm glad you understand kind of trying to figure out for the community feeling about the tax.
Yeah, and I guess when we put the opportunity for added stuff, whatever that could support up, we estimate between 4 and 5 basis. We looked at that and we envisioned that if it was a request that departments had that we couldn't accommodate because of all the other expenses that the general fund we're taking on, we could put them here in those out years. Now, that doesn't mean, and again, looking at the projections at this point, it's hard to with confidence say we could have a real expense that gets supported by Measure LV at this. There may be in a couple years, and again, that's what I mean about allowing this to we get better experience, not just projections of what actually we are using versus being able to hold on to. Because you can see we're putting 2.4 away this first year. That's great. Maybe 4 is higher in the second year. So I want to be careful that we don't put ourselves into a predicament where 10 years from now we've run out of this money and we've added whatever that new thing is that can't be supported by this or even the general fund. So that's kind of where I'm being cautious. Doesn't mean there can't be those requests.
Cautious is good, just in our mind. And you're right, experience, we only have a year. So.
Right, and the year of a pandemic. Sorry, Marlene.
Yeah, exactly. But there is opportunity for that. As if we show our taxes are going, we're getting more money and stuff, then it shows those opportunities that we can bring and support through this measure.
Yes.
In the future. Thanks.
Marlene?
Yeah, and I kind of go along a little bit with what Jennifer is saying. I think the challenge and probably the elephant in the room that most people don't understand is the whole fire department issue, because some comments that I've gotten from people in general is that, well, we passed this tax measure and shouldn't some of this revenue go to fully staff a fire department or fully staff and say another department that may need additional people. And so I think I don't know that the public or the community really understand maybe the kind of why we're doing what we're doing and not spending it all the first year or even maybe even the second year, because you don't know what's going to happen and you don't want to run out of money in year 5 and there we are, having passed a tax and not able to really do anything significant. But that's just a comment I'm making, because I think there's a misconception by some in the community as to really what this measure was.
Would it be, Marlene?
I'm losing you.
I don't hear
I'm
you.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Maybe one thing we can do is outside of the action is put an article together that explains that we can share out on social media and to the community, kind of any action to support this use in tier 1. Hear me
Sorry,
again, right?
Bob, your microphone's
Yeah.
not working.
Yeah, you're
Sorry.
breaking up. You're breaking up, Bob.
And
Sorry.
it's important what
Is
you're
this better? I tried to up my microphone setting. Is that better?
We'll keep
Can you
talking.
hear me at all?
Yes,
Yeah, we
yes.
can hear you.
Okay.
You're right there.
Don't move. Okay. What I was saying, Marlene, is maybe it would be helpful coming out of this meeting if we do a kind of an article and a social media post that kind of explains what we've approved or concurred with, and also how we are envisioning tier 2, something to that degree or degree, or why we're holding off on any tier 2 commitments at this point, to kind of explain for the benefit of those who maybe don't understand.
I think the more transparency that's there, I think it just makes it better for everyone. I think including the council, including you as the city staff, and obviously for us, because I think what you're saying does make sense, and I understand the reasons for what you're trying to accomplish here over the next 10 years. But I think we have, the voters voted for this, and with certain assumptions in their mind. So we need to address that as best we can.
Well, it'll probably be after the budget gets approved next week, but I'll work on putting, we do our media strategy for a month, but I'll make it a point to make that one of the articles that comes forward on specifically.
And
Okay.
there's an opportunity if we do well in our tax base for the cream on the top of the cream, or the cream, whatever, something that goes in there that we can look forward to.
Right.
Because I think
Okay.
that would go a long way with the community.
Okay.
Thanks.
I do have one question, comment, Bob. I know before we had set up this meeting, the 3 remaining members kind of met and discussed some issues. And I guess one of the big things that came up is our role on this committee and what is expected from us. So if you could just spend a few minutes and kind of touch on that, please.
Of course. And are you referring to the scope that the city council, through the creation of this committee?
Yeah, because we're trying to figure out, are we just, I guess, meeting and just reviewing the recommendations that's presented to us, or are we going to be making some recommendations to you or city council?
Well, the overarching responsibility, and then we can get into some of the details, are there are 3 basic points. The first is in the measure, it says that the committee must review the expenditure, the proposed expenditure before council takes action on it. So that is the step here. So your job is to understand and go, okay, based on the questions that were asked, this money is specifically for purposes that are intended under tier 1. So that's one of your main objectives and purpose. The second thing is, as it relates to the revenues and expenses, is when we have tier 2 items, when we get to that point that get brought forward, is to determine based on if it's a recommendation from a department or something that has a specific purpose to it, a one-time expenditure that is necessary, and typically coming through a department, I guess. Because even if it's something from the community, we would obviously ask them to work with, I don't know if it's the police department, because you use the canine example. If the chief doesn't feel he can support that, we're not going to come and ask this committee to spend that money, right? So once those requests get made and we have that capacity, we'll evaluate those requests to see if they comport with tier 2 spend, and then support that as part of the budget.
Okay.
The next thing is when we looked at those 2 out meetings for later this year, and it is to confirm that the dollars that were approved were spent on the intended purpose that they were voted in for. So those are I'll call it the 4 major objectives and purpose that this committee has. And then that report, the output of the meetings get shared with the council. And it is an opportunity like this is for the public to engage so that they can either observe or make comment about the expenditures being. Does that help?
And we'll put a requisition in for a new.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, it does. Thank you. So from what I'm understanding, it seems like most of the recommendations have to flow through some department. It's not something that this group would be able to discuss and recommend. It needs to come from some sort of city department, correct?
Well, that's where I think it would come first. If there's a situation that would come here first, again, I would want to vet it through the department to see if it makes sense with their operation before we say we want to commit something.
Okay.
Any other questions? Question.
You know what? One other thing in regards to the salaries, I know we're looking at the 10-year plan, and my understanding that's the extent of this sales tax increase, correct?
Based on our projections here, this will support increases for the next 10 years. And that was always what was expected. Yes.
Okay, so now looking beyond that 10-year mark, if it comes up to vote again and it doesn't pass, but we'll still be on the hook for these salary increases. Is that something I guess the general fund would be able to absorb at that point, or are we implementing all these increases, with the assumption that we're going to get another tax increase in year 11?
No, there are 2 parts to that. The first is this tax is in perpetuity. It doesn't sunset in 10 years. So this revenue will continue. However, to your point, after the 10 years, how do we deal with increases? Could be different. I don't know. That's a question are there other revenue sources from all the transit-oriented development that goes on with the Gold Line that can support those increases going forward? We don't know yet.
Okay. I thought it was a 10-year measure.
No.
It's a forever.
Yes.
You guys are quick on that. Good. Well, then let's make it worth the community's extra input or extra funding.
Very good. And if there are things that this committee, back to the question, of how things can be promoted, I guess, for lack of a better word, if there are things that as a committee member that you're hearing because they're looking for enhancements, you can share them with me and I can filter them to the department at the respective department to ask them to take a look. That's one function that it can serve on the front end and then still have it cycle back through.
It's a good idea.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the group? Mark, Christy, do you have anything else?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Am I okay to stop sharing my screen?
Thank you. Can you share your microphone with me?
Yeah.
I apologize, everyone. I don't know why this is acting up, but I appreciate you bearing with me.
So how about if we allocate a few dollars to get Bob a new microphone, so we have a little better meetings next time? Sorry, Bob. I had to throw that in.
It was fun to pick on you anyway. Could have been us.
Well, I'll turn my screen back on now.
Oh,
since,
there you go. Oh,
yeah.
now we can
Now you
see.
can take the punches.
Yeah, there we go. All right. Anything else for the good of the group? Danny, anything as chair to add?
So we
No,
can
nothing to
gather
add.
with the people in the group, just 2 at a time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
Have to meet
yeah,
each
no
other.
more than one other, I guess, is the way to describe it. So, because you are subject to Brown Act as far as discussions on items associated to this committee.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Be nice to get to know each other a little.
Yeah, well, social is okay,
Okay.
but discussing
Oh,
matters that would be pertinent, like if there was something, hey, let's talk about if we all got together and talked about what can we add to tier 2, that wouldn't be appropriate to talk
Okay.
about as a group. Another, sure, but not as a group. Okay,
okay.
great. All right,
Thank you.
thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you,
And
everyone.
we'll
Hey,
keep
thank
you
you.
posted. I will share that article once we get it drafted before it goes out final. So you can do it.
Okay.
Great.
Hey, sounds good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.